Hello and welcome to Attacks of Opportunity. I'm your host, John Sprunk. I have a special guest today. Lou Anders is a Hugo Award-winning writer, editor, art director. He does it all. He is the man who discovered me way back when at Pyre Books, and one of my best friends in the world, a great guy. Please welcome Lou Anders.
Thank you. It is very nice to be here. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to have you, my friend. So today's topic is how to introduce kids to Dungeons and Dragons. You have children. I have a son. I know you've played with your kids. Do you still? Is it ongoing?
Oh, yes. Both of them.
How often do you guys play?
Well, pre and post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, we were playing a game about once a month. And that's I had several different campaigns going, and the ages run from the youngest being 10 or 11 to the oldest being a friend of mine in their 40s, and they all at the table together. Post-pandemic, I'm playing more often for less time. Instead of getting together for a whole Saturday, we're playing like 2 and 3 hour blocks on an afternoon using Roll20. Mm-hmm. And so we're playing maybe twice a month, maybe sometimes 3 times a month.
Well, that's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
And your children are how old now?
11 and 15.
Great. And when did they start? How old when you guys started playing D together? How old were they?
We actually didn't start with Dungeons and Dragons. We actually started with the Fate role-playing game system, if you know that.
I'm familiar, yeah.
Yep. And that's a wonderful system. We played that for 2 years. We played a game of Fate that was set in the world of my Thrones and Bones books. Mm-hmm. And after 2 years, they started to I could tell they wanted something more crunchy. You know, they were going, how much gold do we get? And I'm like, well, Fate doesn't really work like that. You know, there's a big pile of gold, whatever you want. You know, well, what do we get any magic weapons? Fate doesn't really work like that. You know, sure, why not? And I knew they wanted something a little more crunchy. And so we had gotten the Dungeons & Dragons box starter set when it came out and done nothing with it. Mm-hmm. And I thought we'd do that. And I was trying to explain Dungeons & Dragons to them. And I'm explaining how you level up and everything else. And they go, oh, so it's like a video game. And I'm like, yes, but, you know, it's the video game is like it. You got the cart and the horse reversed. And when they realized that, then they really wanted to play.
Very cool. Very cool. So my son's 11. We played about twice. This is about 2 years ago. What I found is, unfortunately, my son is much like myself. We're both control freaks. And it was difficult for both of us to let go and work together to make a story. Have you found that with your own children, the bond is so close that it's hard being the DM and the dad?
I don't think so. My son's a min-maxer. He gets in there and takes it apart and figures out what he thinks the optimal character to play is. Mm-hmm. And again, too, we're playing with several groups of people that include adults and older kids, and so we played with some of their friends, we played with some of my friends, some of our relatives. So you know, when everybody's at the table together, it kind of, you know, at one point, my daughter makes a reference to one of the adults that plays with us, and she calls him by his first name. And I'm like, no, you're supposed to call him Mister. And she goes, I played Dungeons and Dragons with him. I'm not calling him Mister.
Was he cool with that?
I don't know.
That's great. Yeah, the familiarity, it's a double-edged sword, maybe, that sometimes, obviously, the closer to the bond, you know your family so well, you can make adventures you know will tickle them. But on the other hand, sometimes they could play it back on you, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. That's very cool. Do you think it's different playing with kids than a group of all kids, or a mix of kids and adults together? What are some differences you found?
I prefer playing with a mix because I like the way that Dungeons & Dragons brings people together. Mm-hmm. I taught a 2-week writing and gaming course a few years ago at their school that was just all kids, and it was harder to herd that group. But I don't think it's that different. I think a lot of times people, whether you're writing for kids or gaming for kids, people have this idea that you have to dumb things down.
Mm-hmm.
And you really don't. You really, really don't. And there's some games out there that are made specifically for kids, some RPGs, and I think some of them are a little too simplistic or a little too soft.
Okay.
And we had one adventure that I had built around a town, and I had a lot of role play opportunities for it. And the older players were having a wonderful time just in the marketplace, dealing with people, socializing. And my daughter's like, "This is boring. When are we gonna kill something?"
That sounds familiar. Yeah. The action element definitely is a big turn on. And obviously I was the same way as a kid. Action movies were more my forte than a drama about two people falling in love or something like that. What do you need to keep in mind when you have kids at the table? People, let's say under 13, there's specific things a DM should be aware of.
I treat it a lot like watching movies. I mean, and in fact, that's a good gauge for what your child can handle is what you allow them to watch at that time. Obviously we don't have sexual content. I'm hesitant to do things that involve a loss of agency, maybe. Mm. We had an early game where I was trying to seed this evil force that was coming later, and so I gave my daughter's character a dream where she heard that the voices chanting about the Tiburesh is coming, and she freaked out. What am I doing here? Why would I be there? Why do I hear the voices? And it scared her so bad she didn't play the next session.
Oh wow!
And I thought she would have thought it was cool, and so I'm kind of mindful about imposing things like that on her. But in terms of we've fought some pretty scary monsters in some pretty scary places, and they have a blast with that. And I've asked her, I said, "This isn't too scary for you?" And she's like, "No, because Dungeons and Dragons, I can kill the monsters."
Right. Maybe it's the idea that children don't have a lot of power in the first place.
Yeah.
So if the game takes away even more power, it freaks them out. Whereas if they have the agency to go out and
deal with it, exactly.
Yeah, it's probably very empowering.
In some ways, the whole middle grade novel dynamic, which is children learning that they actually have agency and then exercising that agency.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
There's a sword in the stone, and nobody thinks I'm the one that can pull it out, but I'm actually the only one who can pull it out.
Right. Yeah. When did you start playing D&D? How old were you?
I started with the original box set. I get confused about which, because I had basic Dungeons and Dragons and then I had AD&D. Mm-hmm. There was a hobby store in my hometown. It still exists, although it no longer carries RPG material. And they had it, and we got it, and my folks got it for me. I came home and started playing it, fell in love with it, and about 6 months after that was when the Satanic Panic reached our church.
Yeah.
And my folks came home and said, "Are you sure you should be playing this game? Is it satanic?" And I was like, "Well, you got it for me, and I'm hooked. So it doesn't matter if it is or not. It's too late now."
Really? How old were you when that happened?
And that was it.
So how old were you when that happened? When they came and talked to you like that?
Oh gosh, I don't know how old I was. I was. When did D&D come out? What year was it?
I got the basic set in '78. I think Advanced came out like in '80.
Yeah, so I must have been a tween, or I think I was like 12, 13, somewhere in there.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you play all through school? I mean, was it continuous for you all the way through into adulthood?
No, I played up until I got a driver's license. And then we didn't play much more after that.
Okay.
And then I didn't play again until after college. I was living in London, and I got a group of people and tried to play the Call of Cthulhu in London.
Right.
And then post London, I came back to Alabama for a while, and I got a group together to play the James Bond role-playing game, if you remember that.
Was it actually called James Bond?
It was called, I think it was On Her Majesty's Secret Service role-playing. It was the James Bond role-playing game, role-playing On Her Majesty's Secret Service, or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't.
A long title.
Top Secret, but not that one.
No, this is so much better than Top Secret. It was from Victory Games. It only lasted a couple years. It set all kinds of sales records for the brief time it existed, and then Eon Productions pulled their license and it disappeared.
Oh.
But I've still got a whole shelf of their product. It was, I don't know if it was the first time anyone did this, but it was the first, and I played everything. I mean, Boot Hill and Gangbusters and Star Frontiers and Top Secret and Gamma World and Dungeons & Dragons and Call of Cthulhu. So I don't know that, I can't say this is the first time ever, but it's the first time I ever encountered, and like I said, I played a lot, the idea of any kind of fate point or Benny or inspiration point or anything where you have something you can spend to affect dice rolls.
Okay, right.
And so I don't know if they introduced the concept, but they certainly were one of the first people to popularize that concept. And someone in your audience is going, no, that's not true. But it blew my mind. And it was also, like the famous Mask of Nyarlathotep. They did long adventures that would start out, in London in M's office, and then you go to Jamaica, and then you go to Fort Knox, and you end up in a volcano somewhere. And Dungeons & Dragons didn't really have that at the time.
Right.
And that huge narrative that you could I remember buying a Top Secret module, and it was a villain's fortress. I was so excited. I got it home and I opened it up, and they're like, this is a villain's fortress for you to use at the end of your campaign. And there was nothing in it. There wasn't even a villain. It was just a map of a villain's fortress.
Oh, wow.
What am I going to do with this? And so when I got the James Bond role-playing game, and you had, the entire adventure from start to finish, it's magnificent.
I never played that, but now I'm interested.
But then I didn't play again after that for a long time. And then when I was editing, I got fascinated by how many of my writers played Dungeons & Dragons, or even wrote for Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder and etc. And so I started buying campaign setting books, telling myself I wasn't going to play. I was just, interested in the world building.
Okay.
And I had quite a collection of RPG material just from that. And then my kids got interested, and and then I got very excited about Fate, because Fate is a storytelling game. Mm-hmm. in a way that there are other games that claim to be storytelling games too, but Fate is very much modeled on the way cinema happens. It's kind of like they watched a whole bunch of movies and said, what kind of mechanics can we bring to bear to create those kind of narratives? Mm-hmm. And I've used it to teach writing several times, because I think it's so good for writers. And then, like I said, we eased from Fate into Dungeons & Dragons.
And, okay, now if I can wind your mind back to...
No, it's hard to do.
to your early teen years when you still were playing D&D in that first wave. And now, were you mostly playing or DMing?
Always DMing. Always DMing.
Same here.
Yep.
And now you have campaigns you're running now.
Yep.
What do you think the biggest differences are in the games you ran back then and the games you're running now? Is it story? Is it content?
Yeah, I think that we just went through the early modules killing everything for gold. And these days, I think we have really elaborate stories. I mean, I tend to buy. I play with pre-made adventures, and we're running Storm King's Thunder right now, mm-hmm. and in the Forgotten Realms, and then I'm very, very big on Cobalt Press's World of Midgard, and I have 3 separate campaigns set in their world.
Oh wow!
And they have a lot of shorter adventures. And so I like stitching those together into a larger narrative, mm-hmm. with connective tissue.
That's usually what I do too. I'll take some pre-published material, some modules, a couple that I think have a similar theme or a vibe, and I'll stitch them together and try and build a campaign arc that takes you from first level up to whenever you die, which usually is how most of my campaigns end, unfortunately. Do you experience a lot of party wipes in your games, or do you find that they retire naturally?
Our first death was, I haven't had a TPK. My first death was my son.
Oh.
And my wife said, "How could you kill your son?" I was like, "I didn't do it. This is how the dice went." And we let that character stay dead for a while, and he created a new character. And then several sessions on, we all decided we liked the old character better. So they went to a temple and got him raised.
Oh, cool.
He's back. Right. And do you fudge your dice rolls ever?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Ever is a strong word.
Yeah.
I always roll behind the screen or off camera because I want the fights to have a certain cinematic element to them, to be thrilling, but not, too deadly all the time.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to balance sometimes. You need a party of 4, 5, 6 people, and as levels go up, there are monsters I think that would be really tough for them, and they'll mow through it in a round or two. And there'll be fights I think are just, routine, and they'll struggle. So I find that action economy for me is something I'm always juggling. So if a fight's way too tough, I might fudge a little bit to have a couple misses on the monster side, give them some breathing room, or the opposite. If they're mowing through like a dragon, too easy, that guy's getting some more hit points. I give him a little buff or something to extend it a round or two. But when it comes to death, I don't. I tend to be, when we get to the nitty gritty, you know what I mean, where the death saves are being rolled, I tend to let them roll fall as they roll. I figure that's only fair, that if we're going to play a game that chance has a big factor, that you can't negate that. It's artificial then. How about you?
I usually don't, but like I had a game where I had a new player who had just joined and he worked really hard on his character, and he came in and then he did the idiot thing and went off by himself. And the monster attacked, and I rolled 2 crits in a row. And I just was like, I can't kill his character in the first 30 minutes of his game ever. He'll never come back to my table. So I fucked that.
Yeah, I mean, I toy with the idea of having all my rolls on the table or on roll 20, for everybody to see. Because I do respect that there's a thrill in that for the players, knowing that if you get on a cold streak or a demon gets on a hot streak, it can spell disaster very quickly. But my players, they're older, they're in their 30s and 40s. They are not good at retreat. Every fight is to the death. So I'm like, that's like going to the casino and saying, I'm going to go all in every hand and hope that
no one ever takes a disengage action. No one ever does that.
Nobody ever retreats from the first guy falling.
I don't think they know there is one.
Yeah. What do you think parents should know? Parents who don't play D&D and their kids are getting into it, let's say, teenage, preteen age. What should parents know about D&D that they might not realize?
Only that it's a gateway to the worship of Beelzebub.
That's a pro, obviously.
Yep. I don't know. You remember there was an old ad that said, it was an old meme anyway, that said, get your kids into role-playing games and you'll ensure that they'll never have enough money for drugs.
Yeah.
And I've heard this story several times, that there was a parent who sat down with the kid because they were worried it was something bad, and they came away saying, oh, wait a minute, this is math. Yeah. they're learning math, they're learning social skills.
Reading and writing, how dare they?
Yep. Harlan Ellison said one time that he had all of his teachers said don't read comic books, but that it was the kids who read comic books who went on to become voracious readers.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Dungeons and Dragons is a gateway to everything. It's a gateway to reading, to imagination, to socializing, to learning about things, to history. It opens your mind to so many different pursuits.
Do you think you would have chosen the career path that you took?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
I would never have dreamed of being a writer if I hadn't been writing campaigns for years and years to sort of, break, break myself into the habit of creation in the first place. Definitely. Okay, well, anything else you want to bring up at this point about D&D in general, or role playing, or however you?
I don't know. Like I said, I object when people feel like they have to do like a really cutesy adventure to bring kids in, to do something that's somehow dumbed down or made obviously animal companions are good, but not. And I think there are stepping stones. I mean, it depends on how old the child is. I mean, we lower than 8 years old. I think something like Fate Accelerated we've done some work with the My Little Pony guys. The My Little Pony Tales of Equestria role playing game is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But once a kid gets to be like 9 or 10 years old, Dungeons and Dragons is pretty much fine as written.
Yeah. Okay. Were there any rules that you found younger players can stumble over just because of the complexity of the concept?
No, I'll tell you. Well, for my son, I'm usually asking him what the rules are, and or he's coming up. I'm like, "Are you sure your character gets 7 attacks this round?" And he's like, "Yes, I do, and here's why." I'm still not. I think someone's putting something over on me, but
he knows his old man.
Yeah, but for my daughter, getting her on D&D Beyond in front of her own laptop was great, because before we did that, she didn't really know the character, and now she sits there and looks at the character sheets and takes it apart, and that interactive aspect that D&D Beyond provides has made it really open up for her.
Yeah, I found even with adults, sometimes if you give them a character sheet, the first time that their eyes go wide, like, yep. This is like trying to decipher, computer language or something, and you have to sort of, really point it out, because the modern character sheets are pretty complex at first glance. I mean, yep. A lot of information. Remember the basic set, is your basic stats, your name, your level, your class, and some weapons, and not much beyond that. But
it's like going to the Cheesecake Factory and just going, you know what? I can't read all this. Just give me a taco.
Right. Yeah. But your third visit, you're going through it like anybody else. And, there's a bit of a learning curve with that, but I haven't found with younger players that it's any steeper than it is with adults. I find that, maybe it's because, the agile mind makes up for lack of experience, something like that. But I think older players get more daunted about, not doing it right than the younger players do. Less hangups maybe about it. There's a question for you, because this is something I struggle with D&D. How open are you in social situations about discussing your love of gaming? I mean, you're at a party.
Unabashedly.
Really? Well, yeah. That's you. That's always been you, as far as I've known you. You've never had that moment where you're at a party and you guys are all discussing, you're meeting somebody new, discussing, what they do for a living. No problem saying, I'm a fantasy writer, and I also play D&D. And wow, that's good. I wish I had that confidence.
Well, I remember one time someone, one of my daughter's parents was over, and they said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I've been painting brains in the basement." And they're like, "Oh, for Halloween?" And I'm like, "No, but Dungeons and Dragons."
There's usually a pause then, like
I can see there being like, "Oh, okay."
Well, that's great, man. It's awesome talking to you. It's been way too long.
Always.
Love you to death, man. Lou is the author of the Thrones and Bones middle grade fantasy series. You also have a Star Wars book. Remind me of the title. I'm so sorry.
Pirate's Price.
That's right. And then Once Upon a Unicorn. That's your newest work, right?
Yep, just came out.
Awesome. And is that one also middle grade level?
It is. It's the Thrones and Bones series is my attempt to write epic fantasy for 10-year-olds. So it's a 3-book trilogy that's very deep in its world building, and is the upper end of middle grade. I've got quite a few adult readers. Once Upon a Unicorn is still middle grade, but it's the lower end. I'm writing more for the 8-year-olds than the 12 and 13-year-olds. and it's it's about unicorns. So there's a very specific demographic that's very interested.
Are the kids that age more excited to see you come to their school and talk, or less excited than the ones that are a little bit older?
I spoke at a few high schools, and I in Texas actually, and they were really excited for me to be there. And I was kind of nervous going in because I'm like, these people are older than my, but they loved it. But the kids are wonderful. Of course, there's always one, but but no, I've had great experiences talking to schools.
That's wonderful, man.
Well, although with the new book, I teased the new book last year before the pandemic hit, and this little boy in the front row goes, "Excuse me, do you have a daughter?" And I go, "Yeah, I have a daughter." And he nudges his buddy in the ribs and goes, "That explains it."
Only girls like unicorns, right?
Yeah, which is not true.
Not true at all, man. Unicorns are for everybody. That's awesome. Alrighty, and we're gonna see you again maybe in a couple months when something upcoming occurs that you want to come over here and talk about.
There's something upcoming. I've spilled the beans on it a little bit, so I put the cover up on my website, and I've talked about it on Facebook. So I have, since March, and it's September now, I have been working on an RPG, Dungeons and Dragons powered setting guide in the world of my books. I started in March. The idea at the time was I would do like a little 32-page PDF with a single adventure and maybe 5 pages of lore just to see if I could. And that was March. And now it's 139 pages as of this morning. And it's got the first 50 pages are setting guide. And then there's character options and subclasses and things. And then there's a 25 monster bestiary. And it's going to have at least 3 adventures in it at the end.
Awesome.
Like first, second, and third level. And it's grown quite a bit. And the best thing about it to me is I've been commissioning artwork again. And I miss being an art director. And I've been commissioning a ton of artwork. So I don't know if the context of this thing is going to be any good, but it's going to look incredible.
I can't wait. We're going to get a copy because my son will want to play that so badly. And I look forward to it, man. Thank you so much for being on today.
My pleasure.
And we got to do this more often, okay?
Yeah.
Be safe and be well, Lou. We love you.
Cool beans. Love you too, buddy.
Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this special episode of Attacks of Opportunity. I want to thank our special guest, Lou Anders, a good friend, a great author. Please go check out his works and hit the subscribe button below and share this video. We really appreciate your support. Thanks again.